we go. That works. And welcome in. If you're here and you've been here, then we're going to be working on going through the Bible in a year. I didn't get all of the posts last week live. They are on my YouTube channel, and at some point I'll probably just do a conglomeration of playing a bunch of them here so that they are here. But welcome in, sit back and relax and enjoy our time looking at God's Word. So it is Tuesday, so if you're looking at the chart here, that shows that we're on Joshua 6 through 10 because we're doing history on Tuesdays. So we're trying to go through and do one different type of literature within the Bible each day, not a straightforward, let's read it from beginning to end. That gets burdensome, and most people aren't successful doing that kind of a style. So I like this style where we take a different type of literature each day of the week, and helps us keep on track. And if you get behind, you just pick up and get that day caught up whenever you're able to. So, all right, so we're going to jump in and look at Joshua. When we last left Joshua, he was at Jericho, and the spies had been sent, and the spies had escaped. And so they knew there were spies in Jericho, and so they've taken precautions against Joshua. They've heard the stories of what Joshua did on the other side of the Jordan River, and so that's where we pick up our story for today. So, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets on ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times." Yeah, march around once for 6 days. I'm just clarifying in my head. Okay. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priest blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the walls of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Okay, so he gets the instructions all up front. That's kind of cool, because if you just got the message one day at a time, this would be really okay. So let's just play that out for a minute. Go march around the city once and come back. What will you do tomorrow? I'll tell you tomorrow. Tomorrow. Yeah, go do what you did yesterday. What are we going to do tomorrow? I'll come back. Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do tomorrow. What are we going to do today? Same thing you did the last 2 days. And boy, that doesn't feel good. But look at how God does this here. He says, go do this for 6 days. Just do a lap. And then on the 7th day, change it up. We're going to do 7 laps. Now just think about the people inside. Okay? March around the city once with the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have the priest carry their trumpets and ram horn in front of the ark. Okay, they're not blowing the trumpet for the 6 days. At least I don't see that they do that. Maybe we read later it'll say that, but I don't see the instruction to blow the ram's horn. It says carry the trumpets in front of the ark. On the 7th day, they do it, and then the walls are going to fall. You get instructions on what you're to do, and then you're going to get the answer of what God's going to do. Just super cool. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord followed them. Okay, so they blow as they're going. Probably just music, whatever, not the big long blast, whatever kind of thing they're playing. The armed guard marched ahead of the priest who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. At the time the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had all this time the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to the camp and spent the night there. Okay, one of the things is siege warfare is common, at least in the time of Joshua or following, and with the Romans especially. A couple centuries later, you get into siege warfare. We have walled cities, and then you sit outside, you camp out, you keep them locked inside. They can't go in and out. They can't get supplies. Eventually, they're going to run out. You're outside. You can hang out for as long as you need to. But they're inside. This may not have been a common practice of siege warfare. It was kind of like, the walls are too big. We can't get in, and we're just stuck. But they're beginning this psychological warfare. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The army went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. So just to make sure you got it, we got the same story on day 2 as we did on day 1. They took the time to write it out again, so we knew all the details, and then we did it for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times, the 7th time around. When the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. Couple things there. We talked about Rahab the last time being spared, and there's the cord, the scarlet cord, and her house is to be passed over, so to speak. So there is a rescuing through that. So we did that. Now here, as we go forward, there will be specific instructions at different times to different cities. What you do in this city is different from what you might do in the next city. So we're just looking at the specific things here. All the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are to go to the treasury. Which treasury? The temple treasury. Not the king. Well, there's no king yet, but the temple treasury. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted. And at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her in accordance with the oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out their entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her family and all that belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent to spy as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. Okay, just a few things to mention here. We think of history books as a certain type of writing. Biblical history is not the same kind of writing as modern history. I'll just point this out to you here at the end. It says, and she, that's Rahab, lives among the Israelites to this day. Well, at the time of the writing, that would have been accurate. It's not accurate now. She does not live among the Israelites to this day. So you could say, oh, well, that's inaccurate. No, it was accurate when written, as written. So we all would then logically understand it would not be that way and true for infinity. People die. We know that. To say she lives among them to this day is to make a point about she didn't leave them, and after being rescued by them, she remained among them and became part of them. So that's the implication here. Not all I got saved and rescued, and then I got fed up and I went my own way. I was just doing it as a rescue effort to get. No, it is saying something about she became part of them. That's the point it's trying to make. I just want to point that out, that at times hyperbole is used, but it doesn't absolutely mean literally. Think about a football game. You'll say that we totally annihilated the other team. What do we mean? We're talking about the score. We're not talking about anybody being injured or being killed. We use that language as hyperbole to talk about the severity of the victory. And we'll get at this going forward, but I just want to make a point of it now. When it says, they devoted the city of the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. And you're going to say, oh, that's horrible. They killed everybody. Well, later on, they're commanded not to intermarry with certain groups of people that they have conquered. How can there be a possibility of intermarriage if they killed everyone? So this is not necessarily intended to be taken literally that every single thing was destroyed. The point was that things were supposed to be devoted to God, and that the things that weren't supposed to be devoted to God were not supposed to carry on. So why would you kill all the sheep, the cattle, and the donkeys? Well, donkeys don't make good sacrifices. The sheep and cattle could have been made into sacrifices. It's talking about the severity of the destruction. Every living thing in it. We're going to include all that. I mean, if we were to talk about a city being annihilated today, we wouldn't talk about the cattle and the sheep. If we wanted to describe a city being totally annihilated, we talk about even the cats and dogs. They died because the battle was so severe that they destroyed everything. Even cats and dogs there were dead cats and dogs all over the city. So I just want to point that out. Our understanding of total war and total annihilation is, still like it's hyperbole when we're talking about and describing things. So just wanted to point that out, because we get at times, if you are a Christian, non-Christians who say, well, how awful is that God ordered them to kill women and children and all of that. Well, at times there might have been actual commands to do that. Other times it may have happened, and it doesn't mean that there was an entirety of just genocide happening. There was judgment that was happening. And so you also have here that which goes counter to that whole thought that Rahab is spared, and not only is she spared, as we already read last week, her name is in the genealogy of Jesus. So just keep that in mind. So, all right, we'll keep going. At that time, Joshua pronounced this solemn oath: "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild the city of Jericho at the cost, of his firstborn son. He will lay its foundation. At the cost of his youngest, he will set its city gates." Yeah, so putting a curse that so that nobody will consider rebuilding it. There also was a warning, I kind of passed over it, a warning earlier for people to not violate taking the stuff that was devoted to God, and to be selfish and to be self-centered and to hoard things. There'll be times when there's spoils to be divided, and there'll be other times where no, there's orders to destroy things because we don't want anything remaining from this particular city or people. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. We saw at the beginning of Joshua, there was an important point that said, God said to Joshua, "I will be with you." So here there is a confirmation that God was with Joshua. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Ooh, I didn't remember he was of the tribe of Judah. Ooh, that's interesting. Some of you are going, well, why is that interesting? Well, we've got to get to the line of David, who's of the line of Judah, which is where the kings come from. So from the tribe of Judah is where Rahab is going to marry into. So there's an interesting thing potentially happening there. So interesting, nonetheless, to me. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai. That's how it's often pronounced. Some would just call it I. If we were to look at this, if it was a Hebrew word, the A would be silent because it's actually a consonant, not a vowel necessarily. But I'm not going to worry about that. So AI or I or A, I don't know. They're all dead, so we don't know entirely. We'll just continue. Which is near Beth Aven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out the region." So the men went up and they spied out Ai. I'm just going to go ahead and go over here and look. So we're going to look at Joshua 6. Oh, sorry. We went to 7, didn't we? Yep. Okay, but the children of Israel committed the trespasses, the cursed Achan, son of Carmi, son of tribe of Judah. Blah blah blah. Okay, next one. Here we go. Let's look at sent men from Jericho to Ai. See, here's the Hebrew. Let's pull that one up. Beth Haven, Bethel. I just wanted to look up some of these names a minute. So here is the ways it could be spelled: Ai or Aijah or Ieth or Hey. Means heap of ruins. What a great name. So I think perhaps this was not the name of the city necessarily, or there was a play on words that it was one of these other ones here listed, the Ijah or the Iath, was potentially what it might have been in their own language, which sounded like Haya, which would be the Hebrew for a heap of ruins, and so they left the city in a heap of ruins. Oh, that's funny. I didn't remember that. Okay, so let's look at Beth Haven, house of vanity. Nice. And Beth El is house of God. I knew that one, but I wanted to show that. So Beth means house. El is abbreviation for God. So you have Beth El, that's house of God. You have Beth Aven, house of vanity. Wow. Huh. I wonder if that's the same as Beth Haven. Might not be the same as Beth Aven, but I'll pursue that in my own time, not your time. So, and we're back here, and so let's go. Is there anything else here that I wanted to see? No, let's just go back to our reading. Okay, so sidetrack on some name meanings, but the program I was using there is just Blue Letter Bible, and you can look up verse by verse. It's King James, but you click on it, it gives you the tools to see words, and you can look up the words individually. So now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and spied out Ai. So notice he's doing the same thing. He spied out, got a report about Jericho. Now he's spying out, getting a report about Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. Okay. They killed 36 out of 3,000. Doesn't seem like a rout to me, but okay. They chased the Israelites from the city gates as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Then So they're getting Joshua's getting the report. Is he getting the report? Let me see this. When they returned to Joshua, they said, now the army, not all the army, send 2,000 or 3,000. So about 3,000 went up, but they were okay. Not clear here if this is a report to Joshua or Joshua was there. A little unclear on that, because the way it was reading was send 2 or 3, not go with 2 or 3. So not clear on that, but we'll just go from the standpoint. It looks like 2,000 or 3,000 went, and then they're giving the report to Joshua. And so then when Joshua hears the report, here's what happens. And Joshua tore his clothes and fell down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. Now remember, this is the sign, tearing your clothes and putting on sackcloth or ashes, part or all of that, or sprinkling dust, same kind of thing, is a sign of mourning and a sign of repentance. It is designed also to be an outward expression of inward sorrow. So you are making your outward appearance look like your inward appearance is, so that everyone can see what you're feeling. So this is all day long. And the elders do this as well. And Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name? So this is interesting to say the least. He is saying, in some sense, probably what the people are thinking. Why are we stuck? Or why did we lose? Why did you bring us here to lose? We've got one victory, and now we lost, and this wasn't even a victory we should have lost. We're gonna get smoked. Everybody's gonna hear about this and come and annihilate us. I mean, what's that do for you? But again, the question in here isn't a selfish question. I want you to see that. It's now what will the Canaanites and other people of the country hear and say, and then what will be made of your great name? Like Moses had the concern for, if you wipe out the people you brought into the desert and then everyone hears about it, they'll say, what kind of God is that? He brings his people out to the desert to worship and kills them all. Don't start over with me, God. You need to use this people, even though they sin. We need to do that. So Joshua is repeating that same kind of mentality of saying, I want your name to be honored. This doesn't feel like that's honoring to your name, and I'm concerned that what's going to happen next is going to not contribute to that. So God, what's going on? What's going to happen? Again, not selfish thought in there, but concern for God is the primary focus there. The Lord said to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them in their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemy. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. So, why is the question I come across here? Not why does what happens next have to happen, but why didn't either Joshua check with God and say, is it time to go against the next city? Because at times he does that. Why didn't he do it here? Why did he just move forward? Was there some sin in Joshua in moving forward and sending the spies and not inquiring of the Lord? I don't know. I'm not saying there was. I'm asking, why didn't he inquire then? Or why didn't God, before letting the people go against Ai, say, hey, wait, don't do it. There's a problem. But we don't always know and understand God's ways. And of course, had Joshua inquired, would God have said, yeah, there's a problem, don't go yet. You need to fix it. But it's more of I'll say 36 innocent people end up dead because of what Achan did to start with. So we need to keep that thought in mind, that the loss of those lives are all on him. And so we'll see that that's part of what's going to be judgment passed on him. It's not only the action that he took, but the repercussions of what his actions led to. So and things that were devoted to destruction need to be destroyed. So it wasn't just that so it was things that were devoted to destruction, and that didn't happen. So go consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourself in preparation for tomorrow, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemy until you remove them. Here might be one of the reasons to answer the question that I was just asking, and that was, it might be that God is did not intervene with Achan's action. It did not go to Joshua, so that the people would know and understand just how serious it was to steal and to not obey God. That they don't want to end up wandering in the desert for 40 years again. They were going into the land. They need to be pure. They need to be clear. So there's corporate nature to all of this that we don't quite get. We get individual responsibility, we get that, but corporate responsibility is a little bit different. But that's what's going on here. So in the morning, present yourselves. Okay. Tribe by tribe. The tribe that the Lord chooses shall come forward, clan by clan. The clan that the Lord chooses shall come forward, family by family. The family that the Lord chooses shall come forward, man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Early the next morning. So they have this information of how it's going to happen. Early the next morning, Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clan of Judah came forward, and the Zerahites were chosen. He had the clan of Zerahite come forward by families, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had his family come forward man by man. And Achan, son of Camri, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, was chosen. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Interesting thing here. We were just looking at Cain. Cain kills his brother Abel, and he hides it. He keeps it in secret. Here, in the finding out, I mean, look at this. All the way up to this point, he knows the day before I'm supposed to consecrate myself. I can come forward at this point and tell everyone what I've done, and not make it go all the way. The tribe of Judah gets picked. You can imagine just the nervousness of, oh no, it's getting close, and then it's going now by the clan. Oh no, the clan. Now it's family. Oh no, now we're gonna go man by man. He has to know. He's got to be sweating bullets, knowing he's gonna be found out, and he doesn't confess. And so now he's given the opportunity to glorify God and honor Him. Tell me what you've done. Tell me what you've done. Don't hide it from me. Achan replies, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw the plunder and beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in the tent with the silver underneath. They took things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bars, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkey, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today. Then all of Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan, they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remain to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, the place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. Okay, I'm going to just go over here. Valley of Achor. I just want to know what Achor means. Trouble, disturbance. Okay, that makes sense. Valley of trouble, valley of disturbance. Okay. So some will make an argument and say, well, why is his wife and sons and daughters? Let's see. Does it say his wife? Let me read this. His sons and daughters, his cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Did it say earlier his wife? I saw the plunder messengers. Okay. I'm trying to back up at the instructions. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be fired. with all that belongs to him. That was the thing I was looking for. I thought it was all that belongs to him, but it doesn't mention his wife here. When it says what they took. Okay, maybe she was already dead. Don't know. Just looking through there. But why his sons and daughters? Think about the reality of it. He's bringing back plunder, and he's hiding it in his tent. Um, how could he do this without everyone in the tent knowing and figuring it out? I mean, look at the description of what he took: a robe, silver, gold bars. This was not a small amount. 200 shekels of silver, a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, and a beautiful robe. He could not have gotten this and put it in the tent and dug a pit and buried it in the tent without those in the tent knowing it. Yeah, maybe he could have sent them away if they were in the tent, or yeah, maybe they weren't in the tent when it happened, but you come back to the tent and you see that the ground is disturbed. You're gonna go, what's going on? And then when the information was given that said, hey, somebody sinned and we needed to find out who it was, why didn't his sons or daughters confront him to confess? Or why didn't they go to Joshua? Why did they go to an elder? There was a whole bunch of places where they could have perhaps rescued themselves from the destruction that was coming, but they kept silent. Now, we don't know their ages, and I'm not going to speculate on that and any of that, but it says whoever did it, all that they possess is going to be held responsible. It's restitution. It's a judgment being passed. So it's not vengeance. It's justice. So now that that's over, let's keep reading. We've got a few more chapters to get through today. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." Again, remember we talked about this? I don't believe that these phrases are told to Joshua because Joshua has a problem with fear and he has a problem with being discouraged. They're told to Joshua so that the people hear this, so that they're the ones who are not discouraged and they're not the ones who are afraid. Now, maybe directly at this point, there's a encouragement of Joshua. The promise is now restored, so you're going to go up against the army and I'll be with you. But I don't believe it's because Joshua is afraid and discouraged. I try and remember what I said before, but your mom doesn't tell you, or you don't tell your kids to drive safe every time they leave the house or every time you leave the house because you think that always that there's a potential chance that you're going to not drive safe, or there's a potential chance of actual risk of injury and accident. No, it's because you are pronouncing blessing upon someone and they leave. You are blessing them and doing that. So I see this as God's continuous blessing of his people and encouraging his people, not, they're discouraged and afraid and I better tell them to be courageous. Sorry, I just don't think that that's the point that's going on here. However, it could be necessary for the army to hear this who just got defeated. Maybe there's something to that. So do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You know, this would be more fun to read it as ruins. Heap of ruins. I have delivered heap of ruins into your hands, the king of heap of ruins, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to the heap of ruins and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourself. Set an ambush behind the city. So, what Achan did that was wrong, you're all going to get to do now. Fascinating. So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack the heap of ruins. He chose 30,000 of his best fighters and sent them out at night with these orders. Listen carefully. You are to set an ambush behind the city. Don't go very far from it. All of you will be on the alert, and I and all those with me will advance on the city. When the men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee from them. They will pursue us until we have lured them away from the city. For they will say, they are running away from us as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from the ambush and take the city. The Lord our God will give it into our hands. When you have taken the city, set it on fire. Do what the Lord has commanded. See to it you have my orders. Interesting point here. God gave instructions to Joshua on how to attack the city of Jericho. When he went to go up against Ai the first time, heap of ruins, he didn't have instructions on how to do it. Now that he's going up against them the second time, God gives very specific instructions of what to do and how to do it. Then Joshua sent them off, and they went to the place of ambush and lay in wait between Bethel and Ai to the west of Ai. But Joshua spent the night with the people. Early the next morning, Joshua mustered his army, and he and the leaders of Israel marched before them at Ai. The entire force that was with him marched up and approached the city and arrived in front of it. They set up camp north of Ai, with the valley between them and the city. Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city. So the soldiers took up their possessions with the main camp to the north of the city and the ambush to the west. That night Joshua went into the valley. This is taking longer than I would have expected. Excuse me. When the king of Ai saw this, he and all his men of the city hurried out early in the morning to meet Joshua in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him before the city. Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled toward the wilderness. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hands I will deliver the city. So Joshua held out toward the city the javelin that was in his hands. As soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their positions and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up into the sky, but they had no chance to escape in any direction. The Israelites who had been fleeing toward the wilderness had turned back against their pursuers. For when Joshua and all Israel saw the ambush had taken the city and the smoke was going up from it, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. Those in the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle. When with Israel on both sides, Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivor nor fugitives. But they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. Interesting, no survivors or fugitives. Nobody escaped on the run. When Israel had finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the wilderness where they had chased them, and when every one of them had been put to the sword, all of Israel returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai, for Joshua did not draw back the hand that held on his javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. But Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock and plunder of the city as the Lord had instructed. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent heap of ruins, a desolate place to this day. He impaled the body of the king of heap of ruins with a pole and left it there until evening. At sunset, Joshua ordered them to take the body from the pole and throw it down at the entrance of the city gate. And they raised a large pile of rocks over it, which remains to this day. They like that phrase, remains to this day, the certainty that these things have happened and you can go and find evidence. Of course, a heaping pile of rocks is hard to identify why that heaping pile of rocks is there. But if you know, you're able to tell the story why it's there. And it'd be obvious it was put there intentionally and not a natural phenomenon. That being the point of it. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel. As Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites, he built in according to what is written in the book of the law, an altar of uncut stones on which no iron tool had been used. On it they offered the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua wrote on stones a copy of the law of Moses. Wow. I did not remember that. He wrote on stones a copy of the law of Moses. So he's writing the 10 Commandments on stone. Joshua's making his own copy. All the Israelites and their elders, officials, and judges were standing on both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing the Levitical priest who carried it. Both the foreigners living among them and the native born were there. Okay, just need to point that out. The foreigners living among them and the native born were there. They have foreigners living among them. They continue to have people like Rahab and others who see who God is and the power of God, and they say, I want to be with you, not my people. So half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formerly commanded when he gave instructions to bless the people of Israel. Afterwards, Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and the children and the foreigners who lived among them. Wow. Wow. So they conquer Jericho, very successful. They go to conquer a heap of ruins. The heap of ruins defeats them. I just like saying that. It's pretty funny. The heap of ruins defeats them. They figure out the sin, they correct the sin, and then they go and they destroy the heap of ruins. Hey, Taku, good to have you here. I'm just at the end of chapter 8 in Joshua here. No worries for being late. I didn't have a scheduled time. I just jumped on when I was able to. So we're about halfway through, and we're just finishing up the battle here. And so after destroying Ai, Joshua makes a copy of the law, everything that Moses wrote. It's not a short, quick task. And then he reads all of it. He reads all 5 books of the Torah, the law. That was not a short task either. He reads it so that all the people can hear and know and understand it. So there's some time element happening. We've got 2 victories now, and we've got time while Joshua writes makes his own personal copy of everything that Moses had instructed, and then he reads all of it. Wow, that's just fascinating. And I wanted to make sure, including all the women, the children, and the foreigners. So it's not just all the men get to hear this. The women, the children, and the foreigners get to hear Joshua read all of the law. All right, so we're going to move into chapter 9. You know what? I'm going to pause just a second. I'm going to refill my drink, so I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I just figured if I'm going to jump into 2 more chapters of Joshua here, that's a bit of reading. I might get dry throat, so good time to fill my glass. Well, welcome in again. Good to see you this morning, and good to have you here this afternoon. So we're just continuing to work our way through. You know what? I realized did never switch to this screen. That would have made it easier for anybody to see what I was reading instead of the small little thing. Oops. Sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention. I was just doing my own thing. So at least at this point, it'll be easier to read than it was the first 2 chapters. So sorry about that, but mistakes were made, and I'm not gonna go back and redo that. You might just need to get your own copy, and by now you would have already chosen to do that. So I don't need to tell you now. You're good. So now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, what things? The victory of Jericho, the defeat of Ai, and then the annihilation of Ai. The kings of the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. Boy, this makes a lot of sense. You defeated a couple of us on our own. If we all gang up on you, we'll be good. However, when the people of Gibeon heard that Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." Okay, again, I'm going to raise the question I asked before Ai. Joshua got specific instructions before going to Jericho. When he went to Ai the first time, why didn't he ask God for instructions? Here he's had kings that come to him who want to make a treaty. Why doesn't he ask God whether he should make a treaty or not? Why doesn't he go inquire of God anything here? He does not do that. The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" So he's asking them. They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God." Now, the very distant is the lie, but the reason they're coming is true, because of the fame of your God, for we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, "Take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, 'We are your servants, make a treaty with us.' This bread and ours was warm when we packed it, and at home, and on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is," the ruse, "and these wineskins that we filled were new. but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals are worn out from a very long journey. Well, I don't know if this is the right phrase. If it looks like a duck and it smells like a duck, it's probably a duck. But if it looks like a ruse, it smells like a ruse, it's probably a ruse. Um, the Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. What? What? Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them and let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by an oath. So not only does Joshua not do it, all of the elders ratify this. Say, yes, yes, we're going to honor this treaty. We're working on it. I'm going to go sidetrack for a second just because I want to make connections, and I don't think we're in the right section later to do this. This is one of the things that Saul dishonors this treaty, and then later, like 30 years later, there is uh, a a defeat that David faces because Saul didn't honor the treaty that was made here. Now, I am not saying that they shouldn't have made a treaty. I'm just saying, why didn't they inquire of God? And God might have said, well, they're trying to deceive you, but go ahead and make a treaty with them, and they're going to be your servants. That was the whole deal. They are going to be servants. They're going to be servants in the land. They get to live in the land. They get to be not part of Israel, but servants to Israel going forward. And Saul tries to wipe them out instead. And then David has to make restitution in the same kind of way that we just had Achan have to have restitution in the previous chapter. So, all right, I'm getting sidetracked. That's one problem I have at times, is making all these connections, which isn't a problem necessarily. It helps fill in things and add layers of importance to why they happened and what they mean. So let's keep going. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were their neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day came to the cities Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, not sure. I don't know. Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. Woo, those are fun names. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders. This is different. Normally, it's the people who are grumbling, and the leaders are the ones trying to stop. But here they're grumbling. Why did you do this? You should have known better. You did this. We didn't. But all the leaders answered, we have given them an oath by the Lord, the God of Israel. We cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them. They continued, let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly. So the leaders' promise to them was kept. So that's why they're servants. They're going to do they're going to do a lot of labor, water carrying and wood cutting. What do you need every day? You need wood for your fireplace, and you need water to drink. These people get to do it. They get to do it and help us out. So then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way away from you? Well, actually, you live near us. You are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God. They answered Joshua, your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. We got an oath from you. We did whatever we had to come to you to not die. It doesn't matter if it was deception. That was good enough for us. We're fine with deceiving you. We just didn't want to die. I mean, I don't blame them. I mean, they could have come a different way, but this is what they did. So they're like, so okay, you caught us. Yeah, you figured it out. We're in your hands. We're not going to resist. We're not going to fight. We came to you. We told you what we were willing to do. We're willing to be servants. That seems good to you. It's good to us. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day they made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose, and that is what they are to this day. Again, to this day. Love that phrase. Just telling you that it's happened and it hasn't changed. It's still that way. Now, Adoni Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its kings as he had done to Jericho and its kings, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and become their allies. Allies is not quite the right word. Servants, not allies, servants. He and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and its men were good fighters. So Adoni Zedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Jephthah, king of Lachish, not sure on that one, and Deber, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. This is just an interesting thought. So, all right, they were good neighbors of ours. They have now sided with the enemy. We can't defeat the enemy, so let's defeat the traitors. Sounds good. Let's go after them. But here's the thing: they were a prize. They were, what did it say? Like one of the royal cities. Is that what it was? Well, anyway, yeah, like one of the royal cities. It was large and had good fighters. So we can go conquer them, and we can take the spoils away. Then Israel doesn't get them. So, 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. I still don't know that one. Joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal. Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hands. Not one of them will be able to withstand against you. Okay. Not sure sequencing here, but there is a clear hearing from God. They are honoring the treaty. They probably didn't need to inquire of God to know they should respond immediately. They're in peril and we need to rescue. We've got an agreement with them. We need to honor that. We need to honor God. But there nonetheless is a confirmation from God in their actions that what they're doing is what they should be doing. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up from Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Ezekah and Makkedah as they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah. The Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of Israel. That's just, I love those fascinating things where we're fighting and then God intervenes with some natural or supernatural, depending on how you view hailstones. weather phenomenon, and more of them die from the hail than die by the sword. There's got to be some massive hail um, coming down, but they're out fighting in a field, and so yeah, there's potential damage coming when you have no place to run and or hide. So on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jasher. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all of Israel to the camp at Gilgal. This is one of the, I think, most bizarre things that is mentioned in Scripture that I have no clue how to explain it. Obviously, the idea of sun standing still is from a human perspective, and we still use the language of the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, even though we know the sun is not what's moving, the earth is revolving. It's still a language that makes sense. We talk about the moon rising or the cycles. So we have language. So making the assumption that the sun stood still is a reference that in some way means the sun stopped moving or the earth stopped spinning, I think is erroneous to kind of think through that. Um, I think what it's meaning is there was daylight. There was daylight for about a whole day. Okay, well, yeah, normally there is daylight for a whole day. Well, full day, meaning day and night in some way. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what it looked like. I've got no, I've got guesses. It would be just speculation with nothing to back it up. But I like how it describes it as that there's never been a day before it and a day since it. That's pretty cool. Um, but what it is the certainty that God was in control. God's the one who defeated the enemies. God's the one that gave the victory. That's repeated with the idea that more died by hail than died by the sword. The other thing is if there's hail, usually you have an overcast, cloudy sky when there's hail coming. Now, if it was some other form of brimstone, which would be taught, that could be from a volcanic eruption, it could be from meteorites of some kind, those kinds of things. But it says hail, so I'm thinking they know what hail was. I'm going to go look up the word, but I'm not going to bother. But the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down a full day. How? Yeah, I don't know. Just anything I would say would be speculation. And then this would be one of those places where people say, see, that's not scientific. It's not supposed to be scientific. It's supposed to be supernatural. Whatever it was supernatural because God did it. That's the whole point. So saying there's a scientific explanation is defeating the point because there's not supposed to be one. Okay, let's continue our story. Now the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Makkedah. When Joshua was told that the 5 kings he had been found hiding in the cave of Makkedah, he said, "Roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies. Attack them from the rear, and don't let them reach their cities. For the Lord your God has given them into your hand." So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach the fortified cities. The whole armies then returned safely to Joshua in the camp of Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me." So they brought out the 5 kings out of the cave, the king of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight." Is this maybe the reason that God keeps saying it? Is now Joshua is going to repeat it and it's going to be resounding that God is with them? Is that maybe why he had been telling Joshua to be strong and courageous? Not because Joshua wasn't, because his men needed to hear it. Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. You want to go and be in that cave? We'll return you. But notice, this is the second time that there's a display of the leaders dead, but they're only left up there till sunset, and then they take them down and bury them. Interesting. That day Joshua took Makkedah. He put the city and its kings to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it. He left no survivors, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Makkedah to Libnah and attacked it. The Lord also gave the city and its king into the hands of Israel. The cities of everyone in it Joshua put to the sword. He left no survivors, and he did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish. He took up positions against it and attacked it. The Lord gave Lachish into Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the second day. The city and everyone in it was put to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. Meanwhile, Horam, king of Gezer, had come up to help Lachish. But Joshua defeated him and his army until no survivors were left. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Lachish to Eglon. They took up positions against it and attacked it. They captured it that same day and put it to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it, just as they had done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all of Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They took the city and put it to the sword, together with its kings, its villages, and everyone in it. They left no survivors, just as at Eglon. They totally destroyed it and everyone in it. Then Joshua and all of Israel with him turned around and attacked Debir. They took the city, its kings, and its villages. They put them to the sword. Everyone in it was totally destroyed. They left no survivors. They did to Debir as its kings, as they had done to Libnah and its kings, and to Hebron. So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, the mountain slopes, together with all their kings. He left no survivors. They totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua subdued them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the whole region of Goshen to Gibeon. All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all of Israel to camp at Gilgal. Okay, so we made it through the end of that. And boy, there's a lot of fighting going on. And so you've got 5 kings that come up to try to attack Josh or Gibeon. They've made the treaty with. Joshua goes to defend their new treaty partners. They defeat those who come to attack. They pursue those who came. They find them in a cave. Then they go one by one, city by city, taking everything that belonged to those kings who came against Gibeon. So now, I mentioned earlier, I'll mention it again. This is battle language, and just because it says everything was, he totally destroyed all who breathe, we don't have to make the assumption that that is meant to be literal. Um, totally destroying something doesn't always mean literal, total destroyed. Jesus said that the temple would not have one stone left on it when it was going to be destroyed, and it was destroyed in 70 AD. You can go to Israel, and there is the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. As I've seen pictures of it, haven't been there, but if I've seen pictures of it, there are stones on top of other stones. Well, literally, that means it wasn't true that not one stone would be left upon one stone. That's not the intent of saying it. The intent of saying it is utter destruction. You're not going to be able to worship in the temple. It's going to be gone. It's going to be totally destroyed. So in saying all of these people are totally destroyed, there's no people left. There's no city left. They destroyed them. They annihilated them. So total destruction is not necessarily a key phrase that means literal total destruction. It's not intended to be the point. And even if it was, this is God judging the people for their sins. So if God gives life and people sin against God, he's perfectly justified in calling in their life at any point because they have not repented of their sins. So if that's a 50-year-old or a 5-year-old, God gave them life and they've sinned and he's taking their life. He uses different means, and we'll go through the Old Testament. He uses lots of different means. But again, I'm going to say I don't think that they're, because of things that we'll see later when we go along, that they intermarry with people, and there's mention of some of these people still being around later, that when it here says total annihilation and totally destroyed all who breathe, doesn't mean that literally. It's hyperbole describing the just total destruction that was been able to be brought about in this time. So that's kind of where we're at. So that finishes up Joshua for today. Let's go look at, okay, I'll cross that off. We've got Joshua. That is, oh, I'll have to do it later.